Melania Trump fired the first shot, launching a personal attack on Barack Obama, something no one saw coming. Obama, always quick with a comeback, responded with a pointed remark. When you tell your stepson, you're not really his mother. The pressure on Melania was palpable, but then she did something no one expected. Just as things reached a boiling point, Donald Trump made a dramatic entrance. What happened next? You won't believe how this intense moment unfolded. The atmosphere at the high-profile event was charged with anticipation. The crowd of well-dressed politicians, dignitaries, and guests buzzed with quiet conversation, sipping drinks, and exchanging pleasantries. It was one of those rare occasions where the powerful mingled without the usual tension, where the weight of politics felt distant, almost like an afterthought. The event had been planned for weeks, and everything seemed to be going according to schedule until the moment no one saw coming. Suddenly, the room grew still as Melania Trump took the stage. The First Lady had always been a figure of elegance, known more for her quiet presence and graceful demeanor than for any dramatic public statements. She had rarely stepped into the political spotlight, preferring to stand behind her husband, Donald Trump, supporting him from the sidelines rather than engaging in the public clashes that often defined his administration. But this evening, something was different. The moment Melania began to speak, it was clear that she was about to say something that would shake the room to its core. Without warning, Melania turned her attention toward Barack Obama, the former president who had been invited as a guest speaker. Obama had long been a towering figure in American politics. Admired by millions for his calm and reasoned approach to leadership, his speeches were often filled with hope and optimism, encouraging people to come together and work toward a better future. But on this night, he was about to become the target of an unexpected attack. Melania, standing at the podium with her poised, composed manner, wasted no time in making her move. In a sharp, deliberate tone, she aimed a personal jab at Obama. "We all know," she began, "that the promises made during the Obama administration were never fulfilled. It was all talk, and no one wants to admit it. Now we're seeing the results of those failures." The words hung in the air like a challenge, almost as if she were daring anyone to disagree. The room grew silent, the tension palpable. For a moment, the audience didn't know how to react. It wasn't just a criticism of Obama's policies. It was a personal shot at his legacy. Melania, who had kept a relatively low profile during her husband's presidency, was now openly questioning the very foundation of Obama's time in office. The audience, stunned by the sudden shift in tone, exchanged uneasy glances. It wasn't long before Obama stood up to respond. He didn't seem surprised by Melania's remarks, but there was an unmistakable tension in his eyes. As a seasoned politician, he was no stranger to public criticism. But there was something about Melania's words that stung deeper than the usual barbs. This wasn't just about policy, it was about something far more personal, and he knew he had to respond. Obama's response was calm, but it carried the weight of years of experience. He addressed Melania directly, his voice steady, but filled with an underlying sharpness. "Melania, I understand your frustration," he said, "but we both know that the real issues go deeper than just politics. It's about leadership and what kind of example we set for the future." The words were measured, but they hit hard. Obama wasn't just defending his presidency. He was speaking to something much more important, the values that should guide the nation forward. He wasn't about to let Melania's attack go unanswered, not with the kind of leadership he believed in, but he wasn't going to descend into the same petty back and forth that had become so common in today's political climate. Yet, just as Obama finished speaking, Melania's eyes narrowed. The glimmer of determination in her gaze made it clear that she wasn't backing down. There was no hesitation in her voice as she replied, "I'm not here to discuss what happened in the past. I'm here to talk about the future, and that future will be one where America puts itself first. That's why we need a new direction, a direction that doesn't just promise hope, but delivers on it." Her words were strong, echoing the nationalistic themes that had become central to Donald Trump's presidency. It was clear that Melania wasn't just defending her husband, she was defending an entire vision for the country, one that was diametrically opposed to the ideals Obama had championed during his time in office. The tension in the room was palpable now. There was no going back. What had started as a political disagreement had quickly escalated into something much more personal. The former president and the First Lady were now at odds, not just over policy, but over the very soul of the nation. The words they exchanged were no longer about the politics of the day. They were about something much deeper. They were about what kind of America people wanted to live in, one that embraced unity and progress, or one that sought to protect its borders and maintain a sense of national identity above all else. As the back and forth continued, the audience was left in a state of suspended disbelief. Was this truly happening? Had Melania, who had been so quiet for most of her time in the public eye, really taken such a bold step? And had Obama, the former president, been so directly challenged in such a public way? The evening had taken a sharp turn, and it seemed that this would be a night no one would soon forget. But as the confrontation heated up, it was becoming clear that there was far more at stake than just a disagreement between two political figures. This was about a battle for the future of America, one that would set the tone for the years to come. As the tension in the room grew thicker, it was hard to tell who had the upper hand. But one thing was certain, this was just the beginning of a confrontation that would unfold in ways no one could predict. The silence in the room was deafening after Melania's direct attack on Barack Obama. It wasn't just the weight of her words that made people uneasy, it was the sharpness of them. As the former First Lady spoke, her voice held a firmness that no one had seen coming. It was as if the composed figure that many were used to seeing had finally broken free from the shadows. And what emerged was someone ready to fight for her beliefs. For a brief moment, everyone in the audience held their breath, unsure of what would happen next. Would Obama, known for his unshakable.com, respond with the same level of composure, or would he retaliate in kind? The room waited with bated breath, watching as the former president prepared to speak. Obama didn't waste time. He knew that Melania's words weren't just about policy. They were an attack on his character. He had spent years building a legacy that was rooted in hope, progress, and unity. To have that legacy questioned so openly was a challenge he couldn't ignore. But Obama wasn't the type to fall into the trap of personal conflict. Instead, he chose a different path. A path that would make his point, not through anger or rhetoric, but through the power of truth. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Before speaking directly to Melania, I know you feel the need to defend your husband's vision for this country. But attacking the past without acknowledging the lessons it offers only sets us back. Obama said, his voice calm yet heavy with meaning. The progress we made wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And I don't believe we can build a stronger nation by ignoring that progress. It was an eloquent response, one that conveyed not just a political ideology, but a fundamental belief in the importance of looking forward without erasing what had already been achieved. Obama's words were measured, carefully chosen to keep the focus on the issues at hand, not on personal insults. But Melania wasn't backing down. She wasn't the type to let something as simple as a calm rebuttal throw her off course. In fact, the more Obama spoke, the more determined she became. The tension between the two was palpable now, and the room could feel the spark of conflict grow. She had taken the first shot, and she wasn't about to let it fizzle out. With unwavering confidence, she shot back, her voice sharp and filled with conviction. I'm not here to talk about your progress, Mr. Obama. I'm here to talk about the future, about what this country needs right now. The past is done. What matters is what we do moving forward. Her words were aimed not only at Obama, but at the entire room, as if daring anyone to disagree with her. The former First Lady wasn't just defending her husband's administration. She was making a larger statement. Her words echoed the themes of Donald Trump's presidency: America first, a focus on national pride, and a belief that the country needed a strong, decisive direction to secure its future. Obama, however, wasn't ready to let Melania's words go unchecked. He could sense the rising tension and knew he had to address it head-on. But this time, he was going to shift the conversation to something more personal, something that would remind everyone of the difference in their leadership styles. Without raising his voice or showing any sign of aggression, Obama leaned into the moment. Melania, it's easy to talk about the future when we're so quick to erase the lessons of the past. Leadership isn't about pretending the past didn't happen, it's about building on it. And sometimes it's about telling uncomfortable truths. At this, Melania's expression hardened. She wasn't someone who was easily rattled, but Obama's words clearly struck a nerve. He was challenging not just her opinions, but her vision for the future. She had come here to make a statement about the direction she believed the country needed to go. And Obama's calm response was pushing her to reconsider how far she was willing to go to defend it. Then, in an unexpected twist, Obama hit her with something more personal, something no one had anticipated. His voice lowered slightly, and the words he spoke carried a weight that could only be described as a challenge wrapped in truth. You know, Melania, he began, it's a tough thing to explain to a child that you're not really their mother. And yet here we are talking about things that matter, and the truth is something we all have to face. The room was stunned. It wasn't just a jab at her political stance. It was a direct swipe at her personal life. Obama was referring to the complexities surrounding her relationship with Barron Trump, her son, with Donald Trump. It was a moment that no one saw coming. And for a second, the room was silent as the weight of Obama's words sank in. Melania's eyes narrowed as the crowd waited for her response. She wasn't the type to be caught off guard, but this was different. Obama had crossed into territory that was personal, and it was clear that she wasn't about to let that go unanswered. She clenched her jaw before responding, her words coming out cold and measured. I am Barron's mother, she stated firmly, as if to end the discussion right there. The crowd shifted uneasily, but Melania wasn't finished. She knew that the rumors about Barron's parentage had been circulating for years, but she refused to let them define her or her family. The whispers had always been there. Some even suggested that Ivanka Trump, Donald's daughter, might be Barron's biological mother. But Melania wasn't about to let anyone push her into a corner. Trying to regain control of the situation, Melania attempted to deflect with a strange, almost awkward remark. In today's AI world, anything is possible, she said, as if trying to laugh off the personal incident. It was a comment that seemed out of place, an attempt to shift the conversation away from the uncomfortable territory that Obama had entered. But Obama, unflinching, wasn't about to let her off the hook. So is he? His voice was calm, but his challenge was clear. Then prove it to the whole world. Let's do a DNA test on Barron. Prove that the rumors about Donald and Ivanka are false. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that put Melania on the spot in a way she wasn't prepared for. The room held its breath. It was no longer just about politics. This had become personal in a way no one had anticipated. And as Obama's challenge echoed in the air, Melania's silence seemed to say it all. Would she take the bait, or would she walk away from the confrontation entirely? The answer was coming, and it was clear that this was far from over. The silence in the room stretched for what felt like an eternity after Obama's challenge. His words had struck hard, almost like a sharp jab to the gut, and now everyone was waiting for Melania's response. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. No one knew how this would play out. Obama had thrown down the gauntlet. He wasn't just making a political point anymore. He was daring Melania to put her money where her mouth was. And now, it was her turn to respond. For a brief moment, Melania stood frozen, her eyes locked on Obama as though processing the enormity of what had just happened. Her usually composed expression faltered just slightly, the tension in her face betraying a momentary crack in her armor. Was she really being asked to go this far? A DNA test proved to the world something so deeply personal. The question hung in the air like a challenge she couldn't ignore. But was she ready to take it on? Obama's words weren't just about the politics of the moment. They were about questioning her integrity, her family, and the foundation of the Trump family's carefully crafted narrative. He had steered the conversation away from policies, away from the presidency itself, and brought it directly into her personal life. For someone who had always kept a low profile, Melania was now being pushed to the edge, forced into a corner she hadn't expected. The crowd was hanging on every second. What would she do? Would she deny Obama's challenge and walk away, leaving the tension to simmer? Or would she accept it, stepping into a new and uncomfortable territory that could very well backfire? Her response was slow at first, as though she was weighing her options. The eyes of the room were upon her, their gazes as sharp as knives. And then, just when it seemed like the moment would slip away, Melania spoke. Her voice was low, but the determination in it was unmistakable. "I'm agreeing to Barron's DNA test," she said, the words barely audible, but clear enough for everyone to hear. There was a collective gasp from the crowd. This wasn't what anyone had expected. For all her poise and control, Melania had just agreed to subject her family to the kind of scrutiny that would be impossible to take back. The atmosphere shifted again. This time, it was less about the politics and more about the personal. The room felt suddenly smaller, as if everyone present could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on Melania. The silence stretched a few more seconds, and then, like a clap of thunder, the room erupted in whispers. People turned to one another, exchanging stunned glances. The First Lady had just agreed to a DNA test publicly in front of a room full of strangers. It was a moment that no one would forget, a moment that would define her in ways she couldn't have predicted. Some felt she had made a bold move, a sign of strength. Others saw it as a misstep, a rash decision that could lead to uncomfortable consequences. But one thing was clear, the dynamics of the confrontation had shifted entirely. And yet, as Melania stood there, her decision hanging in the air, it became evident that there was one force that wouldn't let this situation spiral any further. Donald Trump, never one to stay on the sidelines for long, made his move. The room's attention quickly turned toward the entrance as Trump appeared, his presence as commanding as ever. The sharp lines of his suit and the stormy expression on his face made it clear that he wasn't happy with how things were unfolding. His eyes found Melania immediately, and in an instant, the tension shifted again. This time, it wasn't just about Melania and Obama. It was about Donald Trump's reaction to the unfolding spectacle. Trump's voice rang out, cutting through the murmurs in the room. "Your birth certificate is a fraud." He spat the words, biting and venomous. It wasn't just a retort to Obama's challenge. It was a direct attack, a statement that took everyone by surprise. The crowd recoiled slightly, sensing that the situation had taken another dramatic turn. But Trump wasn't done. He moved quickly toward Melania, his hand reaching out to grip hers. His eyes locked onto hers for a brief moment before he turned back toward Obama. "No one manipulates Melania," he said sharply, the words carrying the weight of a warning. It was as if he was drawing a line in the sand, one that no one, not even Obama, was allowed to cross. The tension in the room reached a boiling point. Trump, furious and protective, wasn't just defending his wife's honor. He was trying to control the narrative. In his mind, Melania's decision to agree to the DNA test was something that needed to be contained, something that couldn't be allowed to escalate further. And so, with one final forceful glance at Obama, Trump took Melania's arm and pulled her away from the stage, storming off as quickly as he had entered. The crowd was left in stunned silence. The intensity of the moment hadn't just shocked the audience, It had left them wondering what would happen next. Had Melania's agreement to the DNA test been a calculated move, or had she been backed into a corner, forced to respond out of sheer pressure? And what did Trump's sudden intervention mean? Was it a protective gesture, or was it a sign of something deeper? A desire to control everything, even the narrative surrounding his family. As they exited the stage together, Trump's words still echoed in the room. The tension that had gripped the event was far from over. It was only just beginning. The fallout from this confrontation was going to be huge, and how it would play out was anyone's guess. For Melania, the moment she agreed to the DNA test had set a new precedent. She had crossed a line that few had expected her to cross, and now she was facing the consequences of that decision. But with Trump by her side, there was no telling how far this battle for control of the narrative would go. The room was left to simmer, the conversation shifting quickly from politics to the personal. And in the days to come, the media would be buzzing with questions. Had Obama's challenge gone too far? Had Melania made a mistake? And what role would Donald Trump play in shaping the outcome of this unexpected clash? As the tension in the room reached its peak, something unexpected happened. Something that shifted the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Just as Melania's agreement to the DNA test hung in the air, a shadow fell over the stage. Donald Trump, the very man whose leadership had sparked the controversy, had entered the scene. His presence was as commanding as always. But there was something different in his eyes this time. He wasn't just walking into the room. He was walking into a storm. A storm he wasn't going to let rage on without his intervention. The crowd, still buzzing from the intensity of the moment, turned as Trump made his way toward Melania. His face was set in a grim expression, an expression that made it clear he wasn't happy with how things were unfolding. His eyes immediately locked onto Melania, his gaze softening just for a second as though checking if she was all right. But that was the only softness he showed. The rest of the room was met with a cold, sharp glance, like he was already calculating his next move. The murmurs in the audience became louder as Trump closed the distance. What had started as a moment of personal confrontation between Obama and Melania was now transforming into a showdown between two political titans. Trump wasn't going to let Melania stand there, exposed, alone, in the spotlight. This wasn't just about defending his wife. It was about controlling the narrative, protecting his family's image, and reasserting his own power in the conversation. "Your birth certificate is a fraud," Trump declared, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. The words were jarring, not just for their audacity, but for what they represented. A direct attack on Obama, echoing the infamous birther controversy that had dogged Trump's early years in politics. Everyone in the room froze. This was no longer about the DNA test. This was about a larger fight, a fight to reframe the narrative, to twist the conversation into a confrontation that left Obama on the defensive. Trump didn't even spare a glance at the audience as he spoke. His focus was entirely on Obama. It was a calculated move, one that immediately shifted the conversation away from Barron, away from the private details of the Trump family, and back onto the political battlefield. Obama, who had so skillfully remained calm and composed throughout the exchange, now found himself in an uncomfortable position. The focus was no longer on Melania's words, but on Trump's outburst, and it was clear that Trump had no intention of letting this go quietly. "I told you before, and I'll say it again," Trump continued, his voice thick with authority. "No one manipulates Melania." The words rang out, almost like a warning. It was a line in the sand, a proclamation that Melania, his wife, was off limits. No one would dare twist her words or make her the target of personal attacks. And now, with his forceful entrance, Trump had done something that Melania, for all her composure, had not been able to do on her own. He had taken control of the narrative. The crowd watched in stunned silence, unsure how to react to the sudden, almost dramatic shift. Melania, who had been standing there a moment ago, vulnerable and exposed, now stood at Trump's side. His intervention had been swift, decisive, and completely in line with the kind of forceful leadership he was known for. Trump had always been a man who didn't shy away from conflict, but this was different. This was personal. This was family. As Trump turned away from Obama and pulled Melania close, the weight of the moment was undeniable. For a fleeting second, it seemed as though everything had stopped. The whispers in the room quieted, and all eyes were on the two of them as they made their way off the stage. Trump's grip on Melania's arm was firm, protective, almost possessive, and he wasn't about to let anyone drag his family into a public spectacle any longer. With every step, the energy in the room shifted. What had been a tense political confrontation had now turned into a family affair, and Trump wasn't about to let it play out in front of an audience. As they moved off the stage, the murmurs began again, but this time the focus was different. No longer were people discussing Melania's surprising agreement to the DNA test or Obama's sharp retort. They were talking about Trump's dramatic intervention. They were talking about his decision to reclaim control of the situation and refocus the conversation. His words had been incendiary, but they had done exactly what he intended. They had shifted the entire narrative. The event that had once been a tense exchange between two political figures, Obama and Melania had now become a spectacle centered around Donald Trump's actions. His sudden appearance had done what no one expected. It had redefined the conversation. For a moment, he had taken the spotlight away from the policies, the personal attacks, and the heated exchange, and brought the focus back onto his family, his wife, his son, his legacy. As Trump and Melania exited the stage, the crowd was left in a stunned silence, still trying to process everything that had just unfolded. Had Melania's decision to agree to the DNA test been a move she regretted, or had she been forced into it by Obama's challenge? What did Trump's intervention mean for the Trump family's public image? Would this alter the trajectory of the political conversation? One thing was certain. The confrontation had taken a turn that no one could have predicted. Melania's moment of vulnerability had been replaced by Trump's bold, protective response, and the focus had shifted from the personal to the political. Trump had made it clear he wasn't going to let anyone attack his family. And just like that, the dynamic had completely changed. The public would be talking about this moment for days, maybe even weeks. And as the fallout continued to unfold, one thing remained clear. This was far from over. The stage had been set for a battle that would stretch beyond just a single event. It was a confrontation that would be felt in the coming weeks as the Trump family continued to navigate the complexities of their personal lives in the harsh glare of public scrutiny. And for Obama, it was a reminder that no matter how calmly you approach a challenge, the narrative could change in an instant. The dust had barely settled in the room when the true weight of what had just transpired began to sink in. What had started as a political disagreement, a clash of ideologies between Melania Trump and Barack Obama, had quickly escalated into something far deeper and more personal. The tension in the air was still thick, and as the echoes of Trump's intervention faded, the room was left buzzing with questions. What had just happened? And what did it mean for the future of the Trump family, Barack Obama, and the political landscape they all navigated? The aftermath of the confrontation was felt almost immediately. No one could stop talking about it. People gathered in hushed groups, exchanging thoughts and speculations about the bizarre and dramatic series of events that had unfolded. Melania's agreement to the DNA test had been the first bombshell. Obama's calm challenge had been the second. But it was Trump's sudden forceful intervention that had shifted the entire conversation. No one could ignore the power dynamics at play, or the way that in a single moment Trump had taken control of the narrative. For Melania, the fallout was immediate. Her decision to agree to the DNA test, something so deeply personal, had caught the world off guard. Some saw it as a brave moment of vulnerability, a rare instance in which Melania had stepped forward and taken charge of a situation that could have spiraled out of control. Others, however, saw it as a misstep, a moment where she'd been pushed into a corner and forced to react in a way that wasn't entirely within her control. The media, ever hungry for a story, would be dissecting every word she had said, every pause she had taken, looking for deeper meaning in her every action. And then there was Trump. His intervention had overshadowed everything. He had entered the scene like a storm, and his words had reverberated long after he and Melania had exited. The audience had watched as Trump, with his trademark bravado, had not only defended his wife, but had reshaped the entire narrative. In the blink of an eye, the conversation was no longer about agreement to the DNA test or the personal jabs thrown by Obama. It was about Trump's explosive comments about Obama's birth certificate and his sudden aggressive attempt to reassert his authority over the conversation. The room had been left stunned, unsure of what to make of the moment. Some saw Trump's actions as a protective, almost noble gesture, a husband stepping in to defend his wife from the public onslaught. Others, however, viewed it as a calculated power play, a way for Trump to reassert his dominance in the political arena and take the spotlight off the more uncomfortable aspects of his family's personal life. His words about the birth certificate seemed to many like an attempt to revive the birther controversy that had dogged him for years, a controversy that had once threatened to derail his political career. But this time, the implications felt different. He wasn't just stirring up old political battles. He was using the personal to push a broader agenda, forcing the focus back onto Obama and away from the real issue at hand. As the evening wore on, people began to process the encounter in different ways. The media seized on the story almost immediately. Headlines blared with sensationalized accounts of the confrontation. Melania agrees to DNA test in public showdown with Obama. Trump's outburst at Obama shakes political landscape, and a family battle turns into a national spectacle. The more the story was spun, the more the narrative shifted. What had begun as a direct challenge between Obama and Melania had now become a spectacle centered on the Trump family's personal lives, and Trump, as always, had managed to make it about himself. In the days that followed, the political implications were impossible to ignore. Analysts on both sides of the political spectrum weighed in on the significance of the moment. Some saw it as a sign of growing division, a widening rift between the old guard of American politics, represented by Obama, and the new populist force represented by Trump. Others interpreted it as a sign of desperation, a last-ditch effort by Trump to reclaim the spotlight in an era where political narratives were moving faster than ever before. The question on everyone's lips was simple. Where would this lead? Would the Trump family's personal drama become the defining issue of the next election? Would Obama and Trump continue their rivalry? Or would they seek common ground in the face of mounting pressure? For the Trump family, the public fallout was only the beginning. There were already rumors swirling about the impact this confrontation would have on Barron Trump's life. His name had been dragged through the mud, his legitimacy questioned in ways that most children would never experience. The idea of a public DNA test was something that could not be taken back, and it left a lingering question. What kind of toll would this have on Barron as he grew older? Would he carry the weight of these rumors with him for the rest of his life? Or would this moment eventually fade from public consciousness as so many scandals before it had? But the personal stakes weren't the only ones on the line. The political fallout was beginning to show its teeth. As the months wore on, the confrontation between Melania and Obama became a rallying cry for both sides of the political divide. Trump supporters saw it as a victory, a powerful moment where he had stepped in and defended his family, proving that he would never back down. Obama's supporters, on the other hand, saw it as a reminder of why the political landscape needed change, a warning of the dangers of divisive rhetoric and personal attacks. Behind closed doors, it was clear that Melania and Donald were still processing the event. Melania, who had always been reluctant to engage in public political battles, had been thrust into the spotlight in a way she hadn't expected. Her decision to agree to the DNA test, though bold, had set off a chain of events that neither she nor Trump could have predicted. Trump, on the other hand, seemed to be thriving in the aftermath, his confidence only growing stronger as he navigated the increasingly turbulent waters of public life. As for Obama, the confrontation was a reminder that the political world was anything but predictable. For all his grace and composure, the former president had been thrust into a personal battle that none of his previous political opponents had dared to bring to the table. But one thing was clear. He wasn't done yet. The clash with the Trumps had reignited something in Obama, a fire that would no doubt fuel his next steps in the ever-shifting world of American politics. The aftermath of that fateful evening continued to unfold, and while the world had seen the beginning of a new chapter in the Trump-Obama saga, no one knew where it would end. What was certain, however, was that this confrontation, this unexpected clash of personalities and ideologies, had set the stage for something far larger than just a political dispute. It had opened a new front in the battle for the soul of the country, one that would carry on long after the cameras had gone quiet. This confrontation raised many questions. Did Trump stop Melania from revealing anything more? Will there be a DNA test to clear the rumors? What could happen next between these high-profile figures? Now, it's time for you to think. What do you make of this whole situation? Did Trump step in to protect Melania, or does he have his own reasons? Share your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Your opinion matters in this unfolding.